But you go on TV and you say, let's get rid and get a proper striker. That's where some of us looked at it and went, boy, don't stick it into one of our own. That's, in my opinion, going a bit far.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the On the Whistle podcast. My name is Alasdair Howorth, and today we've got a special one for you. And in the blue corner, I'll first introduce my first co-host today is the big dog Courtney Freese, former Premier Soccer League winner and current, I'm not sure, Essex over 45's mid-table performer, Courtney Freese. Courtney, how are you doing, brother?
Absolutely fantastic, Alasdair. Absolutely fantastic. Had one of the best holidays I've had in a long time. As you can see, I'm blue all over.
It's very appropriate for today's
ready to go. And just to be a bit accurate, over 45 vets survived relegation last season. We went on a run of 4 games, unbeaten, heavy goal scoring was going on. People that never scored goals were scoring goals. We've survived. We are still in the top division. We're good to go this season.
And Courtney, I just want to clarify for the listeners, most people think when Courtney says he's had a wonderful holiday that he's been gone on some exotic island in the Caribbean and is enjoying this. Courtney, tell us, what is your ideal holiday? What has made your holiday so good?
I did absolutely nothing. I didn't go anywhere. I stayed at home. I did the washing the way I like to, the ironing the way I like to, the cooking the way I like to, neating the house the way I like to. Didn't have much TV on. My wife and my daughter went on holiday to South Africa for 1 month, minus me. I basically lived like a man on an island. It was wonderful.
You heard it there first. The best way to spend your holiday: stay at home, do some chores, do the ironing, and be by yourself. Courtney, we'll go from you to someone else who knows a bit more about going around the world. Though I'm sure he
holiday king.
And that is, of course, Mr. Francis Nkwain. Francis, how are you doing, brother? Where are you in the world today? Calling in from?
Still sitting in the motherland from the last time we spoke. I'm in the same place. I've been living a little bit like Mr. Freese. I haven't left my home. I haven't left my base camp or this country or crossed the border in well over 3 months now.
Wow.
For me, it's been an interesting exercise in stability.
I was about to say, Francis, that must be some kind of record for you. 3 months, one place. Wow. Congrats.
But I think I am extremely grateful in this moment to be able to share this moment with you guys, because I didn't stay in one place by choice. I was unfortunately unwell. And I'm very grateful to have been able to have a place in which I could recuperate. So I'm very happy to be able to see the gentleman in the blue corner. And even though I come from the red corner, somehow you seem to be in the pink corner where you are. So all the colors are kind of like fusing into one. So well done, Mr. Howard.
No, Francis, it's good to see you doing well. For a little bit of context of my situation, I was in the middle of recording in my office with Courtney, just about to start the pod, and then realized I'd forgotten some builders were coming into our house, so I had to emergency relocate, which is why the visuals for those watching aren't so great on my end. But Francis, it's great to hear that you're feeling better. You're like you said, being grateful for having somewhere to rest and recuperate. And it's good to have you coming back firing for us in the pod. And today,
I'm good to go.
Exactly. And today is a bit of an interesting one. Courtney, we were saying it's appropriate that you're in all blue because today is a very Chelsea-related themed podcast, although neither of you are Chelsea lovers yourselves. But of course, we're talking about what happened last weekend, which was the kind of beef between Nicolas Jackson and John Obi Mikel. And while it's a bit of fun, I think it does, and a bit silly in many ways to talk about, I think it is a really interesting conversation. And it speaks to a lot of kind of deeper issues and ideas in football, and particularly football being played in Europe by Africans. To give a bit of an overview of what happened after the first match, when Chelsea lost 2-0 to Manchester City, John Obi Mikel on a bit of a rant, criticizing his former club. He was criticizing the recruitment strategy of the team, bringing in players like Kieran Dewsbury Hall and not bringing in the big players. Like he referenced some of the guys who came in when he was there, like Deco and Didier Drogba. And on Nicolas Jackson, he said specifically, just an example of how Jackson finishes his play. Even though he was offsides, he dribbles past 2 or 3 players. But the way he shot the ball, you need a striker who knows how to hit the ball in the back of the net. That's what we don't have. And he said, I know we don't talk about it. I talk about it so much. And sometimes I sound like I disrespect him, but I don't disrespect him. I think we need a top striker who can get us goals. And that's, of course, him referring to the fact that they need another striker. Because he said later on in the BN Sports program, he says, we knew we had this problem from last season to get a striker who scores goals. Jackson, yes, he does a little bit here and there, but we need a top striker like we did back in our day, Didier Drogba. And then he also refers to players like Erling Haaland. Well, then in the game this previous weekend, Chelsea thrashed Wolves. Is it 6-2, 5-2? 6-2. Nicolas Jackson scored after 98 seconds. And then after the game, on his Instagram, not the only Chelsea player to get in trouble for Instagram posts about this game, but he posted on his Instagram with an image of him celebrating after scoring the goal in the 2nd minute, tagging Mikel John Obi, shut your mouth, don't talk shit. We are killing ourselves for Africa. And obviously then John Obi Mikel responded by saying, like, I wasn't trying to be too critical, but, I have my reservations. And Francis, I want to come first to you. I guess for me, the biggest question is why is Nicolas Jackson so upset specifically with John Obi Mikel? Because, Nicolas Jackson has been almost a figure of fun, particularly in the British media. There's a lot of criticism about him, as with this whole Chelsea team. And with the Chelsea team, you can totally understand because it has been a bit of a basket case the way it's been run. And Nicolas Jackson has missed some big chances. But why has he suddenly come out and tagged specifically John Mikel Obi? I want to get your thoughts on the situation.
Well, thank you for coming to me first, because I think Courtney would probably have made a great case for why our dear brother, Mr. Jackson, was probably completely wrong in doing what it is that he did. So I'd like to make a case for why Obi was singled out. And that is more rooted in the sense of community, of identity, of understanding that informed the reasoning why a lot of us led the battle to have better representation of the variety of characters who were on the pitch, also sitting in the studios or commentating on the game. It was for the ability to have context. People whose experience should also help inform the way the audience, the consumers of the product that is football, are able to understand some of these nuances, some of these challenges that these gentlemen who come from different backgrounds face when they come into new spaces. And I think for Mr. Jackson, the challenge has been hearing Obi Mikel go on and on throughout last season. It's nothing new. This was kind of more like a culmination. He has been having a go at a young man who has come into a big club, come into a big league, is learning his trade at the same time, came into the sport relatively late. And he is, for all intents and purposes, an ambassador for a continent. And at the close of that season, yes, there were some glaring misses, and the report card, if we were in school, would definitely say could do better. But we were still seeing a player who wasn't that far off a 1-2 return as a striker in a new club and a new league. And the way he was being addressed had turned into a sort of ridicule. He had become the poster boy for mockery, almost. So it had gone beyond the constructive criticism that you could have for a player to becoming the symbol of jest and almost a caricature of inability. And So I think it was maybe informed by all of this, that maybe wrongly or rightly, and I may say wrongly personally, um, Nicholas, maybe in the heat of the moment, or not, maybe with the support of a few people around him, it's a new generation as well, and that's their mode of communication. Lashes out to kind of like say, hey, we're doing this and it's not easy, and it's not so bad what we're doing. And I think at the heart of this conversation is more the sense of responsibility that you put on the bigger brother. And so I think a long way down the line, the conversation was kind of like, if Obi Mikel has this much of an opinion on the game, there is a responsibility for him to also find different avenues via which he could get his opinion across to the young man in a way that could help him do better. That is not to say don't criticize at all, but the criticism, like I said at the beginning, had become a little bit unfair, because it wasn't for lack of effort. It wasn't actually for lack of delivery, because I believe his stats last season was something like 15 goals in his first year in the Premier League. I mean, by all standards for a striker, if we go back and look at what he was speaking about, comparing him to somebody like Didier, and you would want to look at that, and you would, if you were to check what Didier's return was in his first season, I don't think it was better than the 15 goals Nicolas Jackson had in his first season. However, I think it was more a question of looking at how our culture was supposed to also inform the way in which we accompany the journeys of people who are trying to put their good foot forward. And in this instance, I can't help but feel that the responsibility must rest more at the door of those who are more experienced. And in this case, that's a John Obi Mikel, a person who's been at this club, who should also be able to remember. I don't know if he actually had the privilege of being there at the beginning with a Didier, but Didier had a very tough time as well at Chelsea when he just got there. He was mocked for falling down a lot, feigning not injury, like feigning being touched or being tackled, for being a little bit clumsy. And this person was able to come full circle and become a hero and a legend of that club. And this guy, for example, has found the time and the means via which to contact a player like Nicolas Jackson privately and give him the counsel that he needs. That's not to say he doesn't say you could do better, but also understand that there must be enough there for this club to have invested in him. And he has shown us that there is enough there for us to work with. So how can we help him do better? It's in your self-interest as a Chelsea fan, in this instance, as a Chelsea legend, but also as an ambassador for African football, to be able to ensure that those who have made the cut and are on the stage and the limelight is on them, that we also accompany their journey constructively, because others do that for their own. Now, if I were to take a striker who was of similar ilk to him in Højlund, who's at Manchester United, for example, I don't think the returns are the same for the same position. But everybody, the conversation is more willing to give him time, understanding that he is in a new league. He's learning to play with new players. He's afforded. That's my team. The conversation there is very, very different. And these gentlemen are not too dissimilar. It's a similar story. They've come into a new space. It's a higher profile of club, greater attention, more responsibility, and people are looking to see you deliver on the button. If you were to compare the two, the truth is Nicolas Jackson has done better if we're going by bare stats. But he doesn't get any of that aplomb. He doesn't get any of that credit. So again, I'll say the same thing. It's not to say nobody should criticize him, but I think that when we remember why we fought to have the representation of our own as well on these panels as panelists, as commentators, as analysts, as people who can contribute to a better understanding of the psyche or the challenges of the players who come from the other space. The responsibility is on those others who are now occupying that space to help shed light and make a case. So when they're the ones who are throwing the biggest stones or forever repeatedly questioning a person's ability to be there when time has not really been afforded them, then yes, I think we have the right to feel like they're being unfair. And I think that's the frustration that Nicholas was expressing.
And Courtney, I want to come to you now because Francis obviously has more experience than us of being kind of a pundit on TV. He's done that kind of role in Cameroon and that idea about representing people. But I know you you feel differently. How do you feel about A, Mikel's comments, but B, Jackson's response to it?
Alasdair, I'm actually listening to Francis now. I think Francis puts together a very good narrative that we can carry forward to do an autopsy on this conversation. If I must be very honest, I don't disagree with anything said there. I'd like to look at Nicolas Jackson's response. And let's analyze his response first. So help me with the quote where he says, "Shut up. I understand that." He's going back at Mikel. "We are killing ourselves for Africa. I don't understand that." So that part, if someone can explain that part for me, I would like to know how that part fits into this conversation.
Okay, so maybe I could shed some light there. We must also understand that it's a second language for him. So when you understand the context, it's like saying what we're doing is in French you would say on se bat pour l'Afrique. Right? It's like we are all doing our bit for our motherland, for Africa. So wherever we are ambassadors of this continent. We're trying to put our good foot forward. So nobody's doing it better than another. Everybody, wherever we are, we know what the challenge is, because when we are getting castigated, it's all of us that gets put in the box. So if somebody is sitting somewhere, we're all ambassadors for this. And so if we're at the forefront and the cameras are on us, we're not doing it just for ourselves. We understand the responsibility. So we're doing it. So
we're representing each other.
So we're killing ourselves for Africa. It's like saying we are carrying this brand. We understand what it is. Yes, to shoulder the responsibility. So it can't be us having a dig at each other whilst we're all trying to say we're trying to lift our people. So we struggle from brand Africa being associated with negativity. And I think what he was trying to say in that moment, and I have gone out of my way to actually reach out to understand further. So I'm speaking with, dare I say, a bit of context. So he is managed by a phenomenal human being in Diamante Kamara. This is a person who identified this young man, age 16, out in dare I say, unprofessional football, street football, back in the homeland, and charts out a path that has brought this young man in a comparatively short time to the top of the food chain in world football. And he is learning on the ground, but is demonstrating on a daily basis, because coach after coach has still played him. So there must be something that they see in training. They didn't pay $2 million to buy him. They paid a decent amount. So whether it's the scouts, so a whole structure has seen value in an African. And so at this point in time, it was more like, why are we always the ones who are having the hardest go at our own when others are saying, good enough for us? And those who have come before, who should understand just how hard that challenge is, first of all, to wear that cape, are the ones who almost always want to prove kind of that I can be more objective than the other. So I'll punch harder to show that I'm not being unfairly favorable, so to speak. And nobody's asking somebody to sit back and say, oh, he's doing great. But the repeated castigation or the request that he be replaced by somebody else, when even the stats tell you after 15 goals in a season, your first season in a new league, you just want somebody to say, okay, cool, let's see what the first 10 games of the season look like. Maybe there's some things. He was also injured. He's coming straight from an injury into a game, and all we hear very often is just what's wrong. So that's the context I would share with why he then made the reference to Africa. It's that frustration of what happened to this, our own sense of community, like, or the same way like United fans maybe get the hump when one of our own has a go too much at a United player, like Scorsese might be like, United are really crap. And you'd hear the United guys would be like, can you be like the Liverpool guys and back Liverpool a little bit? It's that sense of identity. So I think that's what he was speaking to in that extra part, which was saying like, if it was just another pundit, Obi Mikel is not the only one who's criticizing him. He gets that a lot. But he's saying like, when it comes from this big brother, who is a legend of this club where I am, who should understand the challenges we've had and which we are having as Africans, don't be the one who's also having the pub. You can find a way of calling me to your house. You have access to this club. You can meet me at the training ground and tell me your opinion about how I could do better. That's what every other person has done. And Diamante Kamara even does this. He expressed how people like Adebayor, Didier Drogba, El Hadji Diouf, all these other African great strikers in the Premier League have reached out to this young man to tell him of their experiences and things he could do better because he carries this flag for us. And one of the things we do know is even Mane has reached out to him 7 separate times just to help to say, brother, loving the enthusiasm, but maybe, you breathe differently or you receive differently or you maybe don't react to things that people say on your Twitter. I guess he will learn. But he's more like kind of like saying to a big brother, somebody who he looks at as a big brother, to say like, you don't speak for us alone. We all do. And if we are doing this thing together, there are ways in which you can reach out to me and tell me I could do better rather than throwing me under the bus in the public space.
I think he needs to look at the criticism and, well, listen, he faces more of it than anybody because it's directly directed to him. I don't think he needs to think that the criticism needs to be understanding, if I'm being genuinely honest here. And in a lot of it, it's not. Mikel is a frustrated pundit of Chelsea. So let's start there, okay? Anyone that's watching Chelsea over this last period possibly thinks they could do a better job. The club has got huge elements of frustration going on. It's not what it was before, especially during his time where they had the robust, elegant Didier Drogba up front. They had the free-scoring Frank Lampard in midfield. They had Kalou, Malouda, and everyone else in the team that were getting over 15 goals a season and just playing a directly penetrative style of football. That is not who Chelsea is at the moment. Who Chelsea is at the moment is a struggling team with a striker up front who is, let's put it on the spin on it, similar to Didier Drogba. That's where the frustration comes. The team is not doing well. And when the team is not doing well, certain players are highlighted a bit more, like strikers, like defenders, like wingers. Now, if we're looking at criticism, don't forget the criticism that Mudryk goes through, heavily criticized by everybody, like Nicolas Jackson. Absolutely. So I just think that one may be a bit too emotional and is saying what he doesn't need to say, but it's come out. I don't think it's a matter of like or not liking. I don't think it's a matter of he doesn't want this guy to do well. I don't think he thinks that this guy is capable of leading the front line of Chelsea. And that's his opinion, Now, if he maybe, especially for a very elegant speaker like John Obi Mikel, I can't actually say maybe he didn't articulate himself well. That would be wrong for me to say because he's such a good speaker. But he's come across quite venomous, if I can use that word, in talking about Jackson. What Jackson needs to do is do what he did on Saturday and then do it again next week and then do it again next week and just score goals. That's it. just score goals. The frustration will be in the direct contact because these mountains never move, but people do. That's where you have the conversation. Have the conversations with him. But he's got two things on his side. The turbulence of Chelsea distracts from what he's doing, number one. And his youth and ability is the other thing on his side. He just needs to keep doing what he's doing. He started off well the season. He ended off the season well. I think he's a good player. I wouldn't mind him in our team because he, besides just being a good player, he's an exceptionally hard-working player. Now, if you look at the top 3 strikers in the league for hard work, one is Nicolas Jackson. I can't recall the second one, but the third one is Dominic Solanke for effort and output being put in. These guys work hard. The effort is there. So I almost think it's an unnecessary beef, if I'm being genuinely honest. An unnecessary beef, something that doesn't even need a platform. Because Nicolas Jackson has got the potential to be a good striker. I don't think he needs to worry about this conversation.
I agree with you. And I think like his text was more a point of saying, I ain't bothered. And that's why it's the nature. You must understand the generational difference. So somebody has a platform where normally, if you went back 10 years ago, you had to be on TV or being interviewed to be able to voice your opinion for your thoughts about what somebody said about you to be known. With this new generation, it's their fingertips. So, okay, maybe they need to learn not to do it because, like Alasdair said, on that same day, you had a gentleman who had a hat trick on that day, turned up in the city and had something to say about the city. Now, people have always had thoughts about where they've gone to play, but we didn't get the preview or we weren't privy to their thoughts. But nowadays, because of the social media space, he didn't do an interview and said, let me address what John Obi Mikel has been saying about me. He just scored his goal and at the end of the game probably went, let me hit that big bro up with this one and he's going to see it in. That was his opinion. Now, that's where we could come back and say, wait, that's not how it's done. But what I'm trying to explain here is the reason behind it. That's what I would like us to look at and maybe have a conversation about whether there is a responsibility that comes with people who represent certain constituencies, because the arguments that were made for them to be in this public space and lending their voice to this was to give context. In the same way, before the players in general were invited onto the shows, it was because you had professional journalists who did this job, and some people then said, but if we have former players or active players on a day where they're not playing, join this conversation and be pundits, maybe they could give us greater insight into the workings of the mind, and therefore our audience would be better placed to better understand why we maybe shouldn't react to certain things in a particular way, or understand the thought processes that inform a decision on the pitch. That's how players became parts of these panels. And now what we have is less and less journalists turning up, and we have opinionated and sometimes aggravated former players. And in the senses, like you were talking about, like if a person is just a Chelsea fan now, and he's just angry because of everything that's going on at Chelsea, the question is, are we saying it's okay for them to come and just also bring down these players and give no context? And this would apply to anybody, because whether it's the former United players or it's the former Liverpool players who, in a moment of difficulty for Liverpool, is there a responsibility on them to remember what it was like for them when they were players, not to add to the pressure? Because we keep telling these young men today that you have to do better. It's par for the course. They're too thin-skinned. But I'm also like, the guys before didn't get as much or this volume of vitriol, to be honest. And now it's almost like because you earn X, keep quiet. We should be able to say anything we want to say about you because you make good money. And it's almost kind of like, well, before you had the Monday paper, the games would finish through the weekend, and the Sun or the Mirror or the Star or whoever would have something to say on the back pages. And it served us, and we went to the chippy 2 days later, and the chips we ordered were put in it. But now these things live for just that little bit longer, and they're more available because if I didn't buy the Sun or I didn't buy the Daily Mirror, I didn't necessarily see that story. But now the news cycle is 24/7. So, and I'm sitting at home. Sky maybe used to have a sports program. Now the Sky Sports 24, and they're recycling, and it's maybe just 4 things they're going to talk about for 8 hours. And so everybody gets to see it. And then there's Twitter or X, sorry, and there's Instagram, and then there's everybody's got a podcast of their own. And so these things come into our bedrooms, they meet us in our cars, and so these guys now, like I saw this video of the team that was trying to get on their trains, and somebody was asking the question that, is it fair that these guys get abused like this and cannot react at all? As they're just going to get a train, they're at the office. You're a headmaster. If you were going to your car park, or you were at Asda or Tesco doing your shop, and parents had the freedom to just come up to you and say, excuse me, I don't know if I can say this, you're shit, and you're not supposed to even react. You're not a robot. But this reaction I'm trying to say here is not exactly something cuckoo. The guy wrote a message on the phone, and maybe his team could come back to him and say, next time, no need to say that. But it's born out of the sense of, should certain people be speaking in a certain way? And that's what I would like us to ask, whether truly and honestly they're supposed to be objective, or are they supposed to be subjective? Because I would like to say that it's the subjectivity involved in John Obi Mikel's presentations that endears him to us. It's not his ability to be objective that makes him anything special. It's the insight that he has. And so when he shares those stories, when he speaks about the African players should not be selected for their national teams if they hadn't chosen early on in their career to play for their home countries. And people go, wow, we need somebody who says these things. It's beautiful. It's because he has context. So he's being subjective when he speaks. So in these moments, the question is, should he also be equally subjective when he's understanding that here's a brother who's just come into a new country, like he did once upon a time when he moved from Norway, was supposed to come to my club, but ended up at Chelsea, even though he'd held up the jersey. But he turned up at another club. But he understood the context of where he was. But he also had teammates like Kalul, who you referenced, like Malouda, like Didier Drogba, like Michael Essien right next to him, the Jeremies, the Makelele's, who he was replacing. All of these players, there was a context where you cannot tell me he did not understand the charge of representing Brand Africa at Chelsea in the Premier League. So this kind of information must inform his discourse. He must be able to understand that I don't need to add more pressure to a young man's shoulders who is just at the beginning of his journey.
Francis, this is why I say, yes, that is the analytical. Yes, that is the pure. Yes, that is the without emotion and not Chelsea doing well where he is not at. He's at the point where Chelsea is a frustrating club to follow. He's at a point where Chelsea are making multiple pig foots at every corner. At every corner.
Are you sure about that?
I would say I'm 100% sure of that. 100%.
But that's Chelsea, the same team. That's Chelsea just the biggest win
Chelsea
in the Premier League so far has been theirs.
Okay. Yes. No, you can throw that at it. You can throw that at it. I say, to me, Chelsea are buying drinks in a pub. That's what I'm saying. That's who Chelsea are. There's so many wrong things going on at that club at the moment. You could pick multiple things. Just look at the amount of players they have to get rid of within this period of time. in this short period of time, you know better than me and anyone else on the show how difficult it is to move players on. If it was an easy thing, they
don't have to. It's your opinion from the outside. Look, there is method. This is my humble opinion. I think the people who are at Chelsea have their game plan. Their game plan is very different to anybody else's. But unquestionably, they have on their books now and a system by which they pay for the talent that they have on their books spread out over 7, 8, 9 years and whatever it is. It's something that a lot of other clubs will begin to copy. But they have 35, 40 talented players. The coach comes on TV the other day and says, but I'm only working with 25, let's say, right? I'm not bothered about the other 15. Their business model allows them at present to be able to absorb that. Whether it works for A or it works for B, it works for them, Chelsea. The way the season ended last year, they were on a phenomenally positive direction of travel by anybody's standards. So well that they surpassed a lot of clubs that were laughing at them at the first half of the season. I'm not a Chelsea fan, but I'm looking at it objectively. Now, after
would you say last year's season what? Did you say
no? I'm saying I'm watching it with interest because I work in the space where we put players in clubs. And players and agents are still willing to bring themselves to that club because there's something happening there that people still want to be a part of. There are clubs that are struggling to recruit that have space to accommodate. And people are asking, why aren't you going there if you know you could play? So the guy who's 19 or 21 and is choosing to come to a club where there are 4 other players in his place, there must be something that is being said to them that they're buying into. They're not stupid. They don't want to come and sit on the bench. And their wages are not crazy. They're not paying the kind of money that we pay at United for salaries. Now, the new money that they offer, so they have a project that they're selling to people who agents and clubs who believe that their players will find success in that space. So I'm not writing it off. I'm giving it time to be able to judge after a reasonable amount of time. When Roman Abramovich turned up at Chelsea, a lot of people said the only way you have success, and anything you'd seen at any other club before that, was longevity of management. So the club that was bossing things at the time was Manchester United. The second club that was bossing things alternatively with them was Arsenal. The one thing they had in common was constance of leadership. Roman Abramovich in his time went through maybe 15, 20 managers. I don't know what the exact number is. And yet his formula of changing managers every 18 months worked for him because every 18 months they won something. There are different ways to skin a cat. These guys are trying something else. It's not been seen before, but they are not fools. I give them credit for that. I don't know what it is that they're trying to do, but I want to believe that they're not throwing their money into the ocean. They have their plan.
Francis, I hear you. I hear your competitiveness. I hear what you're trying to say is, Courtney, we allowed Roman to put in this formula. His formula was unlike a formula that was there before. I hear that. The formula you could see. I'm going to go quick and hard, throw money at it, get players in, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to change it quickly. It's there. This style, I don't know how it works. People are allowed to give their opinion on that. This style is what's frustrating John Obi Mikel. That's what I'm saying. He's emotionally spoken and drawn himself into other
conflicts. But that's the point I'm trying to make to you. And I'm trying to say, he, more than you or I, should we be affording him the leeway of being emotionally invested when he then does punditry? That's not what he was being invited into the space to do. Obi Mikel was not a Chelsea fan when he was 10 years old, correct?
No.
Right. So he spent 10 years at a club, having turned up at this club 2-3 days after having signed for another club. Right? But
a very calamitous thing.
yes,
Yeah.
so he too has been human at his beginning. And so now I'm asking the question more along the lines of, do we think it's right for us to ask of these informed people who have experience, who can go above emotion, that in these moments, is it right for you to speak like a fan when you know better than to? Because you sat in the dressing rooms. You've been a part of the times when it maybe didn't work. Not every year at Chelsea, while Obi Mikel was at Chelsea, was Chelsea successful. There were seasons where it didn't go well. There were probably coaches that he liked who got sacked and he wasn't happy with them getting sacked, and he probably had an opinion about his ownership. But all in all, it's that level of subjectivity that we expect a person like him to be able to pass on to the generations that come after. The ability to find a way to teach somebody like Jackson how to be a better ambassador for our continent. So in this moment, I am saying, in my opinion, the person I will hold to a higher standard is John Obi, because of the reasons you cite. Because he should know better. And because he knows better, he must do better. If he understands that he doesn't represent him and Chelsea, he also carries that flag that is Africa.
So if you say he knows better, if you say he knows better, and we should expect better of him, then his criticism of Jackson is right there. Because
it's correct.
Jackson should be doing better.
But that's what I'm trying to say to you. I'm saying
he should be doing better. So his negativity,
he should be doing better. So he has
his negativity of Jackson is right there because he knows better.
No. What I'm saying, this, and I can say this with chest, it is not correct. You're a father, right? If you have done something before and you know that you also have access to your son or your daughter at home, where you can tell them the things that they need to tell them in a way that would put less pressure on them, do you join the bandwagon when you are at school assembly and they're highlighting the bad kid, and you too, as a parent or a big brother, join in that moment to say, yes, you stand up, you are the bad kid? Or do you say, you know what, in this moment, I am privileged enough to know that I have a way in which I can get this message over to this kid and help them understand how better they can get over this particular hurdle. And it will serve the club that I love, and it will serve also the continent I represent. It's that level of responsibility I'm speaking to.
I think those responsibilities are different, if I'm being genuinely honest. The example you made, I don't think there's anyone in the world that could argue with that. Nobody. So let's not even look negatively or positive or ask an opinion on it. 100%.
But that's why I asked you. But that's why I asked you. I come
back to the sporting, competitive, ruthless world, which is not the education world. It's not that.
No, but that's why you're missing.
So I'm going to flip this to you.
Go ahead.
What would you have said to Nicolas Jackson?
I would have said exactly what Obi Mikel said, but I would say it to him in the same way Drogba has said it to him, in the same way Adebayo has said it to him, in the same way Mane has said it to him, in the same way Alasdair has said it to him, because the platforms that have been put there, the reason some of us campaigned for this multitude of voices was to be able to have context. That's what I'm saying, and that's why I'm repeating what I said at the very beginning. If we disagree on why he exists in this place, why he has relevance, then it's okay. That he's just another commentator. Then it's okay. In this moment, this young man, the reason you asked, somebody explained to me why he added the part about Africa. And I'm saying it's because many of us think they carry a responsibility when they sit in that chair, in that particular space, to give context. Because the Latin American guy who will be privileged to do the same job will be able to give context. The guy who's the former Liverpool young kid will give context to what it means to just turn up at Anfield, and will help the layman understand the pressures that comes with it. Same thing will happen with the Mancunian, same thing. And what we're saying in this moment is, that's why I give you the example of Hoyland. There are no Scandinavian dudes turning up, or no other, even just normal English guys who's sitting there and saying, like, this guy's been a waste of money. They paid handsomely for him, almost double what was paid for Nicolas Jackson, technically. At the end of last season, maybe he banged in 5 goals. I'm not even sure about how many goals he scored, but this dude did 15. And when you hear how they talk about these
Sorry,
two
who are we
players,
talking about in terms of goals?
I'm saying like Højlund for Manchester United. I don't know how many goals he got for Manchester United. I'm just saying, when you hear them speak about those two, they talk about maybe somebody else who needs to come alongside Højlund to help him do better. Cool. Why don't we say the same thing about Nicolas Jackson, who's banged in 15 goals in his first season, about how he could do better? But because there were rash finishes, there were rushed finishes, there were cool. All right, we can all see it. Now, enough people are saying that already to him. The question is, must you join that choir in that space? That's the question I'm asking. That do you think that that's okay? Do you think that our brothers and sisters who then make their way into these platforms, the original battle was we need representation. Now, it's not just color, it's context. And the context is not just in my time, we were braver, we were stronger. He's now saying this guy can't kick a ball. That's a harsh thing to say. That's saying the most basic. There's a young player who turned up at Marseille, Faris Pemi at Marseille, and the same kind of things were being said about him when he just turned up. And people asked the same question again because it was being championed in the same instance again by other Africans. And so it's like, is this the draw the ladder up kind of thing, or is it their sense of I need to be hard to you for you to do better? My question is to understand it. So I'm saying I believe that when you have avenues via which you can still get this message across for the betterment of the player, but if you understand your responsibility to brand Africa, if it's that he says, I have tried to reach out to this guy, I've tried to reach out to his management, I've tried to have a word with him, I sent him a text, I sent him a DM, and he didn't reply to me, or I was at the club, I went, he has access to the training ground. He's a club ambassador still. There's no way you can tell me that you can't tell this young man, like, look, let me put arm around you and say, oi, I wasn't even a striker, but calm it down. Or, you know what, but you go on TV and you say, let's get rid and get a proper striker. That's where some of us looked at it and went, oi, don't stick it into one of our own. That's, in my opinion, going a bit far. So what happens when the person who replaces him is, I don't know, a phenomenal talent that comes from Italy, for example? And then we have one less African ambassador. His job has to also be to help that fight for us to be at the top. It's not to celebrate our mediocrity. I'm not saying tell everybody he's great when we can see he's not. Okay, he's not doing well, but give context and say, I played with Didier Drogba in his first 2 seasons. It took him a while. People will remember that. But now you're talking about finished article Didier all the time. And then people forget that there was a tough time for Didier when he came in. When Didier reached out to this young man, the first thing he said was, it was the same for me. When I came, I had to settle. Nobody's asking, has he found his home? Does he have kids? Does he have his business? But we afford this conversation to everybody else. We would say to everybody else, well, he's still looking for his house, or his girlfriend isn't too happy in Manchester, we give the context for everybody else. That's what those other guys do, and they help the other person on their journey because their journey is our journey. And that's what I think Nicolas was trying to say, that we are all fighting for Africa. Now, if you're knocking me, then you're not helping. So, hush. That's what I understood.
You know, listen, you paint a very clear picture. I don't think Mikel has to answer that way. He doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. He can
but answer the way he does. He got his job.
And his narrative and his belief is, as you pointed out to me, under Roman Abramovich era, when things weren't going well, things moved on. When Shevchenko came and didn't do well, he left. When Crespo came and didn't do well, he left. When Pato came and didn't do well, he left. So he's being indoctrinated into a routine of, listen, when things aren't going well and you're not scoring goals, I don't care who you are, you got to go. But that's what he's been integrated in. I don't think it's got to do anything with him being African or not giving him the patience. I don't think that. I think
I can only answer to the question you asked.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're talking about that.
You didn't get one.
Yes, that statement I didn't understand.
And so when you understand the thinking, then you understand why Mikel or why Nicolas responded the way he did, is because the assumption is that when you have big brothers who have platforms that can help a cause, and the cause is the appreciation of African talent in our space, then it's not for us to also be the ones who are throwing our people under the bus.
No,
that's where I sympathize.
Yeah, listen, the sentiment part that he deserves at the moment, no, let's not use the word, the encouragement part that he deserves at the moment in order to flourish. Like, I think there's so many stories of players that within their first season and a half were absolutely terrible. You know, one of the biggest ones I can remember is the guy that played for Arsenal, left winger, long hair, came from Marseille. He was terrible in his first season. I've never seen someone so poor.
Gervinho.
No. Came from Marseille. What is this guy? Robert Pires. First season. I've honestly, I even thought, no, mate, this guy doesn't have an ability. Second season, I think he went and, went to the mountain and got water. What a player. But these understandings of how people settle, we don't know. It's just that, firstly, I don't see this as a massive beef. That's why when we started this, I said, I don't see this as a beef. They're just arguing about it. That's fine. Let them get on. Alasdair, what's your point on here? It's only two of us that are speaking.
Hey, I don't want to get on these coals that have been lit underneath our feet. I don't want to burn myself. I think for me, and I'll probably wrap it up here because we could probably go on for hours and hours. But I think for me, there is this interesting tension, right, where, you know, there is an element of John Obi Mikel. You know, I kind of see what Francis is saying in that he, you know, whether we like it or not, he is an ambassador for the continent, and I think he's aware of that. And so there is a responsibility to be helping younger brothers and to be supporting them on that journey to help, you know, like Francis said, have more voices in the room, have more ambassadors. But you know, there's also an element of, it's almost unfair to, and you know, it's more of a reflection of the world we live in, and that it's sad that these guys have to be ambassadors, right? Because they should be allowed to just be footballers. They should be allowed to just, and in Mikel's case, he should be allowed to just be a pundit. He should be able to just give his opinions, you know, unbridled. And so there's also an element for me where I think, like, he doesn't necessarily owe it to Nicolas Jackson, but, you know, the sad reality is in some ways he kind of does, because we are, unfortunately, you know, these guys are representatives. And what I always find more interesting is, I don't want to speak so much for John Obi Mikel, but Nicolas Jackson is clearly aware of that. And I guess I'll give you the final point on this, Francis, is people like Nicolas Jackson, we see this a lot more. And, you know, from my view, it seems like we see this a lot more from younger people, from this younger generation. And Nicolas Jackson is the perfect example, right? You know, in a footballing context, he's Senegalese, but he's not, you know, he's Gambian as well. You know, you know, what Senegalese guys have Jackson as the last name, you know, and he speaks English, he speaks Wolof, you know, he has this mixed identity. And I think he has this understanding that, you know, he is a representative of Africa. And I think also he clearly, you know, attributes part of the criticism of him because he's from Africa, you know, and we have to be real about that reality of, you know, players like Nicolas Jackson. There's a racial element, there's an anti-African element, there's a neo-colonial element to the criticism, and he is clearly aware of that. And I guess, you know, maybe, and I would just love to hear that from you, Francis, is there a difference between people of Nicolas Jackson's, you know, age? You know, we've talked about the generation of being on their smartphones, being connected in a way that John Obi Mikel never would have been. But do you think the players of this generation, of this vintage, are more aware of the fact that they're representing Africa and are more, wanting to, more desiring to that, than players of, say, John Obi Mikel's generation, or even I think, back to players coming through in the 90s, like your Tony Yeboahs and your Lucas Hadebes. How do you kind of think that these younger players, do you feel like they're more aware of that?
I think you touch on two very, very pertinent points, and the last of which is which you just referred to here. I do think there is something peculiarly exciting about the way this generation embraces identity beyond just border. So the concept of Africa to them is very loose, but at the same time quite defined. We are of a different generation. And we dreamt of the day where people would not be too focused with particularly where you're from in terms of what village. We were always told about our tribal fights and that. And now it's this sense of oneness that is rooted in a willingness to want to be a part of something that once upon a time was not sexy. Brand Africa was not. Now, people like John Obi Mikel went a long way to being a part of this softening of the African identity, making it more palatable, where he was more just a Chelsea legend than just an African legend. And these sort of individuals inspired people like Jackson in the same way a Drogba would have inspired him. It didn't matter whether we carried the same flag. When you look at the array of talent that's being assembled at Chelsea, the gentleman who had his hat trick on the day again, Madueke, there's this array of talent that fiercely defends itself. We are speaking here a couple of days after Carnival in London. Carnival was started off as, dare I say, almost a rebellious standing to say something went wrong. A man was killed, an injustice took place, and we want to show that things could be better. When we're in 2024, there's a Ghanaian sound system. There's a Guyanese sound system running right next to it. There's a Jamaican float over here next to a Nigerian sound clash booth over there. This identity is now being forged into something new and novel. It doesn't have a script. And so when people feel like they're bonding based on the stones that get thrown at them. And there is plenty of privilege that exists in the world already. A few weeks back in the beautiful UK, we were all stunned by just how easily the sad loss of life of young kids attributed to a young man from Rwanda generated feelings in people who otherwise were just supposedly your neighbor. But it came to the fore and people were being pulled out of their cars. And those of us who were outside of the space were watching these things on the news and saying, this is scary, but this is our reality. So when we say that we want people to forget certain hats, that John Obi Mikel should just be a pundit and he should, those days will come. But at present, it's still a journey. And this journey doesn't have definition, but it needs solidarity for it to be entrenched, not just in the minds, but in the psyche of people, where people then can really just say, this is a human being. And that's why I was speaking about the abuse the players were getting. Here now, I'm not talking about even just being an African player or a Black player. When players are picked on because they earn more than other people, it's because of the dichotomy that exists in our system, in our society, where a person sits down and you're looking for 10 pounds to have a meal, and you hear that a negotiation was done for a guy to earn 10,000 pounds a day. There's a big difference between you and him. They're not as connected with their players. Their expectations, then they want you to be the demigod that you're supposed to, because the kind of money you're making means there should be no errors. These players didn't create the industry in which they're playing. They may be profiting from a moment where there's an abundance of cash and the talent is being rightfully paid for what is their due. Now, we should extrapolate from that we need to be able to go fight in our own different spaces, where if we work in a big firm and the big firm earns $1 billion in a year and they only pay me $10,000, 10,000 pounds a year, I should be making my case for how I get, not castigating the guy who's getting his. But the way in which we live in, we're told to be mad at that guy because he's earning a good living. But they are also a fraction of the population. Now, what a Nicolas Jackson does with his money is a whole community. This summer, the boy spent his time doing medical projects back in Senegal. They have an education program that they're rolling out. These are the other parts of him that we see, because those are the parts of human beings that interest me as an individual. So I look at how they spend their holidays. And if on a holiday, a guy who's a millionaire doesn't choose to go and spend 1 week in this or 1 month in the sun in Saint-Tropez and live it up with 3 friends, just his girlfriend and his kid or whatever, but chooses to give of his time and his resources to help people who are less privileged than him because he remembers where he comes from. I say the same thing, therefore, to the big brothers, that let's never forget the other struggle. So whilst the day may come, maybe when you're 50 or you're 60, where you can afford to just be a pundit, right now, you still need to look out for your kid brothers. The same way we have this bride and we speak to our African football because we want to lend an informed voice to a space that otherwise doesn't give context. That's why it's our raison d'etre. We invite people to the show to give context to things that just made headlines, to help us understand that there's a human being behind the story, and this is what this person went through before this thing happened. I ask simply that those who are in the space, in the bigger ones, whether they're on Sky or they're on beIN Sports or they're on ESPN, never forget that you also are carrying a responsibility towards the rest. Your life may be good. You may be all right. You as an individual now may be a star name where if you walked on the train, nobody would ask why you're sitting in first class. But the day you forget that a cousin of yours who doesn't have your name or your face could be questioned by just another pundit, another punter on that train as to why they're sitting in the same carriage as them, even if it's just with their eyes, then you've forgotten what the mission is. We know that the day will come where we will no longer see color, but it hasn't. At present, we still have challenges. And when we act like they don't exist, then we are failing the generation that comes behind us. So because our lives are good, doesn't mean all lives are good. In the same way, I'm not castigating every other person for being mean. You will hear the most amazing South London blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy defend a cause just as deeply and passionately as I, because that person's life experience has taught them to understand that our shared humanity is important. And in this moment, I want to tie it to what we're talking about simply by saying, I believe that Nicholas's mission was being appended because there was that tint being added to it. It's the same tint that was given to Didier. It was just ignorance and the lack of contextualization. So a person like Obi is there to help to contextualize, to help remind the average fan who's getting angry that it's still just a young guy. It's still just his first year. He could do better. We hope he does. But if after maybe 2 or 3 seasons, this guy is just as shit as I think he is in my head, then let's get rid. Shevchenko didn't come and was kicked out after 3 months, or headlines were being written about how rubbish he was. Everybody understood he was in the latter years of his career. His reputation was already established. Crespo, same. This is a young guy starting. And that's why I give you an example of Hoyland at my club. So let's always remember that to those who are beginning the journey, those who have gone before owe a greater responsibility to them. And we can't justify it just by saying, like, it's just my opinion. When your opinion is going into the public space, if you forget that you represent billions of others, then you shouldn't be there. Because the reason we fought for those doors to be opened to you was for you to lend a voice to contextualization, not just to your opinions, to your informed experiences. You lived it. You know it. It's not a concept to you. It's a reality. So inform us. with good words, the great words he has. He has the gift of the gab. He speaks well. He has beautiful prose. All right. Find those words, use them to help carry along people to understand that this is a human being, a young lad who's starting out, and he ain't doing so bad, but he could do better. But don't stick the knife because you want to prove to people that you're fair and just. That's my opinion.
Francis, I could listen to you talk philosophy and poetry and all sorts all day long. Gentlemen, we have to call it there, because we don't want to keep going, but we definitely could, because, you know, as we said at the beginning, you know, this speaks to so many more bigger issues and challenges that we face, that players face. But yeah, and it's been good to hear from both of you, hear both your thoughts, and let us know if you've been watching, if you've been listening, what you think. Do you fall on Team Francis's and Nicolas Jackson's team, or do you fall on the blue team with Courtney and John Obi Mikel? Hit us up on OTW_podcast, wherever you can find us, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. It's been brilliant to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing how this kind of develops, both for John Obi Mikel and for Nicolas Jackson. And if either of them, John Obi, Nicolas, if you're watching, if you're listening, or Diamansi Kamara, if you want to come on the podcast, give us your thoughts, give us your opinions. We'd love to hear you as well. Gentlemen, a pleasure as always.